also seems to me to be related to the postmodern emphasis on power.
Yes.
Because there's something terrible underground going on there, and that is, and I think this is the sort of thing that was reflected in the Soviet Union too, especially in the 20s, when there was this idea, a radical idea, that you could remake human beings entirely, right? Because they had no essential nature. And so, if your fundamental hypothesis is that nothing exists except power, and you believe that, then that also gives you the right, in some sense, to exercise your power at the creation of the kind of humanity that your utopian vision envisions. And then that has and that also seems to me to justify the postmodern insistence that everything is only a linguistic construct. It again goes down to the notion of power, which Derrida and Foucault and Lacan are so bloody obsessed with. And it seems to me what they're trying to do is to take all the potential power for the creation of human beings to themselves without any bounding conditions whatsoever, right? There's no history, there's no biology, and everything is a fluid culture that can be manipulated at will. And so, I mean, in Canada, there are terrible arguments right now about biological essentialism, let's say. And one of the things that happened, which was something I objected to precisely a year ago, is that the social constructionist view of human identity has been built now into Canadian law. So there's an insistence that biological sex, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual proclivity vary independently with no causal relationship between any of the levels. And so that's in the law, and not only is it in the law, it's being taught everywhere. It's being taught in the armed forces, it's being taught in the police, it's being taught to the elementary school kids and the junior high school kids. And underneath it all, I see this terrible striving for arbitrary power that's associated with this crazy utopianism. But I still don't exactly understand it. I don't understand what seems to be the hatred that motivates it, that you see bubbling up, for example, in identity politics and in the desire to do nothing but, let's say, demolish the patriarchy. It kind of reminds me, and this is something else I wanted to talk to you about, and you're an admirer of Erich Neumann and of Carl Jung. Yeah, and that's the Neumann connection is really interesting because I think he's a bloody genius. I really like The Great Mother is a great book, and really a great warning, that book, and also The Origins and History of Consciousness is
one of my most influential books. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I read an essay that you wrote. I don't remember when it was.
A lecture I gave on Neumann at the NYU. Yes.
Yes, it's always been staggering to me that book hasn't had the impact that it should have had. I mean, Jung himself, in the preface to that book, wrote that was the book that he wished that he would have written. It's very much associated with Jung's Symbols of Transformation, and it was a major influence on my book Maps of Meaning, which was an attempt to outline the universal archetypes that are portrayed in the kind of religious structures that you put forward. But the thing that I really see happening, and you can tell me what you think about this, in Neumann's book, consciousness, which is masculine, symbolically masculine for a variety of reasons, is viewed as rising up against the countervailing force of tragedy from an underlying feminine, symbolically feminine unconsciousness, right? And it's something that can always be pulled back into that unconsciousness. That would be the microcosm of that would be the Freudian Oedipal mother familial dynamic, where the mother is so over protective and all-encompassing that she interferes with the development of the competence not only of her sons but also of her daughters, of her children in general. And it seems to me that that's the dynamic that's being played out in our society right now, is that there's this, and it's related in some way that I don't understand, to this insistence that all forms of masculine authority are nothing but tyrannical power. So the symbolic representation is tyrannical father with no appreciation for the benevolent father, and benevolent mother with no appreciation whatsoever for the tyrannical mother, right? And that's that, and because I thought of ideologies as fragmentary mythologies. That's where they get their archetypal and psychological power, right? And so in a balanced representation, you have the terrible mother and the great mother, as Neumann laid out so nicely. And you have the terrible father and the great father. So that's the fact that culture mangles you half to death while it's also promoting you and developing you. You have to see that as balanced. And then you have the heroic and adversarial individual. But in the postmodern world, and this seems to be something that's increasingly seeping out into the culture at large, you have nothing but the tyrannical father, nothing but the destructive force of masculine consciousness, and nothing but the benevolent great mother. And it's an appalling ideology, and it seems to me that it's sucking the vitality, which is exactly what you would expect symbolically. It's sucking the vitality out of our culture. You see that with the increasing demolition of young men and not only young men, in terms of their academic performance, which, like, they're falling way behind in elementary school, way behind in junior high, and bailing out of the universities like mad. And so, and I
Well, the public school education has become